tell everybody to come inside here and was it working up there?
so here we are, Porsche night again at Ace Cafe, downtown Orlando. Looks like we're gonna have another great night, and Brian May is joining us with some stories about his Porsche passion and a pretty cool car that you've owned quite a few, I know. We talked a little bit earlier and you told me about that. So I just want to sort of dig into, where all this started for you. Where did this whole Porsche thing get started? Where was it rooted?
Yeah, good evening, Brian. I want to say like childhood, like you and like so many other people. It was actually a friend's mother who had a 928 when I was a little kid. That was the spaceman car, right? And so we go back now and talk about Bill Cosby and 928s, but that was the car that was like, that's so cool. That, and I think the alarm system always beeped every 30 seconds, and it was like it's watching us or something like that, right? So that, and then just cars in general have been in my family for, my grandfather, my father. I got stories of my grandfather taking my dad, out to the car lots every weekend, and having the days. And my dad did the same thing to me too.
So where did all this start? Where were you born? Where were you raised?
I was born actually in Polk County, Florida.
No kidding.
Yeah, raised here. Went to a boarding school up in Michigan, and came back down and finished up UCF in Rollins.
Okay.
So I'm an Orlando guy.
So you're in Orlando. Oh,
yeah.
My wife was born in Polk County in Lakeland, so it's
the heart of Florida.
It's the heart of Florida. That's right. Okay, so the car deal started with a 928. So when we're talking about a 928, we're back into the 80s. We're in the early 80s or mid 80s, right? That's when those cars really started to come on the scene.
I remember the phone dial wheels, like the whole
right,
thing. Yeah.
Right, and really they got the big exposure for the movie Risky Business,
oh,
right?
Yeah.
With
yeah.
Tom Cruise.
Yep.
And the car was just like a star, overnight.
Yep.
And just fantastic cars. Like you said, something really different that Porsche did with the back end. A total departure from anything they had ever designed before, and it was now a front engine car with a big V8.
Right.
So was it the engine that was for you, or just the design? That's what got you?
As a kid, it was the spaceship look. It was the eggshell that departed from the 911. Back then, I no difference from it, right? I knew a Porsche, but this was a spaceship. And I remember getting in the car and feeling like you were laying down.
Right.
Right. And then around this, like a few years later, when I was a little bit older, a family friend had imported a Countach.
Oh.
And I remember as a kid, I was relating like this 85 Countach to the 928 that I was used to, that I saw all the time and that I sat in all the time. And I remember like laying down, like there was just these were like alien spacecraft.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, they were.
Cool
and the Countach was much more alien. I mean, that was for me as a kid, and I think for most people, that was really the beginning of the supercar look and all that. I guess maybe some people will argue about that a little bit, but that was really the car that propelled the whole supercar movement, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I remember being in one of those cars in about 1990 in Fort Lauderdale, and at the time I was working with a racing team, and we had some stuff that would come in from the street as well, and we had a guy who brought in his Countach, and we did some things to it, and so I got to take it out for the drive after the work was done. I didn't do any of the work to it, and I was elected to go drive it and make sure everything's good, and it blew my mind, the power of it, the sound of it was awesome, but I got to tell you, everything else just scared the hell out of me. When you got on the accelerator, it put you back in your seat.
Yeah.
But then when you got on the brakes, you were just hoping and praying that it would stop at some point. And it wasn't really the most awesome fit and finish in the car too. It was kind of crazy. It was kind of wild. So it was the experience was cool. I got to drive a Countach. Not many people back then had that opportunity. So I was like pretty grateful for that happening. But the overall experience, I was like, okay.
Was it an early one or a late one?
Yeah, it was an early one, yeah.
So I personally owned an Anniversario, a late model Countach for many, many years. I put 16,000 kilometers on the car.
Wow.
I bought it with like less than 100, right? And that was an experience that first of all, I don't fit in. I'm almost 6'3". My knees were at my shoulders. It was one of these things, but you made it work. And it was some of these driving experiences like, I don't see behind me because I don't care what's behind me.
Yeah.
But it felt like after everything else that I was driving at the time, that it was actually a slow car But once you got going, it came alive. Like the gear lever came together and all these things. I want to say, like bringing it back to Porsche, it's the opposite of what the Porsches are, right? So it was everything in the Porsche feels good. Like it might not be perfect, but the imperfection makes it fun.
Yeah.
And in relating to back to something as exotic as a Lamborghini, the Lamborghini was entertaining, but its purpose was not something that we could do everything with.
Yeah,
And
no,
it was,
you couldn't. It wasn't anything
such an
like
amazing
it
vehicle.
wasn't anything like that versatility of a Porsche.
Yeah.
Being able to take it to the track literally and race, and
Yeah.
then drive it home.
Yeah, I'm afraid to drive a Lamborghini across town.
So what was the first Porsche that you owned?
I bought a 1989 Turbo cab.
Turbo cab.
Yeah, and I bought it here from Contemporary Cars, and it was a used car at the time, and it was $31,000.
That's amazing.
So I remember seeing it and going, ooh, and then I did not own a car at the time,
Yeah.
and I was borrowing a family member's car. And I said, that's a car.
This is, in this whole Porsche community, there's all kinds of crazy things that happen. You hear stories of people where they got their cars, but I don't know if you realize, what you just told me now, and what's going on here. Like, Zach introduced me to the idea of bringing you on the show 3 days ago,
Yeah.
and he just told me that you were a Porsche guy, that you had some cars.
Yeah, I didn't know what we're doing today.
And you love cars, right? But listen to what you just said. You said your first car was a 1989 Turbo cab.
First car I bought myself, yeah.
Right? Okay. Zach's car, who we're going to have on here in a little bit, is what? A 1989 Turbo Targa.
I had mine when he got his, and I remember I loved my car. It had some problems, and it had the 964 Cup wheels on it that somebody had chromed along the way, and I hated the chrome.
Yeah.
And I wanted the Fuchs back, and I had tears in my convertible top. But you know what? If I sat that car in the back of the garage for a year, if I looked at it sideways, it would crank up and go.
Yeah.
There was nothing wrong with that car. It didn't matter if the battery sat, it always worked.
So we were all supposed to be here tonight.
Yeah.
This was all predetermined.
Yeah.
Your 89 cab, Zach's 89 Turbo Targa.
Yeah.
My wife and I have an 89 Carrera Targa.
Yeah.
Like, what are the chances of this happening?
I know.
Isn't it crazy?
That's super rare. That's hard to find.
It's crazy. I thought that the chance of something even remotely like this happening were off the charts, but about 6 years ago in our neighborhood, right here in Orlando, our house, 2 houses down, and then the house across the street from that were 3 of us. An 89 Targa, guards red, an 85 cab, guards red, a 91 C2 coupe, guards red. Within 3 houses, all
Yeah.
variations of
oil
the car.
leaks. All on oil.
With oil leaks everywhere, yeah. So it's pretty cool how these.
Yeah, the
how
EPA
these-
showed up to the neighborhoods and what's up with the sewage
Yeah,
system.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
What are you guys doing? I have a picture of it. I'll show it to you after we get off
Yeah.
the broadcast here. Like, what are the chances of this happening? Okay, so are you going to blow my mind? What color was your?
Oh, it was red. It was
It
guards
was
red.
red too. Unbelievable. Like, this is just.
So, and I
unbelievable.
remember, like, I left the roof down all the time, set it here, downtown Orlando, summertime, baked the seats, like, didn't care. Original carpet was turning gray, and and at the time, it really wasn't that much. I went through, and I want to say 11 years after I had originally purchased it, I had we had a number of other Porsches along the way. I had my own dealership at the time, and I decided going to reluctantly sell the car to somebody who was begging me to buy it.
No
And so
reluctance there.
I wanted to, if I kept it, I wanted to do a number of things to it. And I knew that that was a lot of time, a lot of expense, and I sold it to this friend, and I regret that ever since, because it's a car, one of the few cars that I wish I still had.
Yeah. Everybody says that. Everybody says that about the air-cooled.
But I wish, like, if I kept it, I never actually did anything to it. That I kept it exactly,
sort of kept it.
just new shocks.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I remember going over the railroads over here, and there was a time where they had gotten so weak that I didn't feel it. It was like the a Rolls Royce. It just absorbed the railroad tracks.
Yeah, well, that's great. So you got that turbo cab. What came next for you? Was it how many of you own? Like, what's the number?
Oh,
Do you know?
I mean, you cheat when you say you have a dealership, right? So,
Yeah, sure.
like, at any point in time, you just drive whatever's in
Okay, what's the
inventory.
for real number? What's the
So, it's like uncountable. Dealership wise, I mean, how many do you have
Okay,
parked
but what's
at work?
the real
right?
number that you own that were titled to you? Your name?
Like Porsches in general,
Yeah,
I want to say close to 15.
close to 15.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I have one other friend who's owned, I think he's on number 14 right now, so
Yeah.
pretty good company. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So out of all these cars, what are maybe a couple of favorites? What
So-
or was it certain times that you owned them that meant something special to you, or was it more about the car?
I think the cars in general. So when I was a teenager, I loved racing, and I've been very successful at karting. I went into the Barber Pro Series, and through that here at Sebring, Vic Elford was a coach with Skip Barber. And we ended up hiring him to be my driver coach. And so you talk about like Porsche fame, like Vic
yeah.
Elford. I mean,
Sure,
it's
yeah.
like, he was the guy that was just refill with a cigarette, right?
Right,
So
yeah.
the guy taught me so much about balance and dancing. It was something that, I think today carries forward. If I sit in the car with somebody and if it's not a dance, there's something wrong. Everything's about a balance.
Right.
And that's where the Porsches, I think, came alive. And he would tell me how he could actually get a car to hop like a skateboard during a rally stage. How he would punch the brakes and disbalance the car to absorb or jump over different obstacles in the race or the rally, and the Rally Monte Carlo and Targa Florio and all these things where he's driving a 906, a 904, a 911S, and just these stories with him were incredible. But the teachings, they were like, if he was my piano instructor, he'd be smacking my fingers all the
Right.
time. But it was one of those things that I learned so much about, but it really made a difference a decade later, like where I reflected upon the things that he told me about driving. And the cars, to get back to your question, the cars that really made an impact to me, I owned a Carrera GT for 7 years. That, of course, as we all know today, is just the best analog supercar you can have.
Yeah.
I'm proud to say I put lots of dangerous miles on that vehicle. I made someone sick. I'm not going to say who it is, but they're a professional athlete today, and they actually got out of the car and threw up. That was a car that was just insane, but like we were talking earlier about what cars have really made an impact. And I want to say the 996 GT2 may have been the hairy car that really pushed me to where I was actually scared of driving it hard.
Yeah.
That was a car that I think it's undervalued today. It's a car that's just wicked fast. It ticks all the right boxes. Some people don't like the looks and things. They had that car right.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the reason why I ended up having my personal vehicle as it is today, because of how it felt and how it drove.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So
Yeah.
today's car, 2011 Cabriolet GTS.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And how long have you owned this car?
I've owned this car, since they started building it.
Wow, since new?
Yeah, there's
Wow.
a good story behind it. I was on the Colorado Grand, a nice, well-known tour. I was driving a small little car, an 8C Alpha 1934, somebody else's. I wish I owned it. It's actually the individual got injured, and I'm not going to tell who it was, but he got injured and asked me to fill his place and drive his 8C Alpha Le Mans car. So this multi-million-dollar Alfa Romeo I'm driving around, and during this tour I'm talking to another friend who owns a very large dealership in California, and I was saying, I'm dying for another Porsche. I sold my 997 turbo, 993 turbo. I wish I never sold that car. What is the next Porsche that we should never, ever get rid of? And he told me, he said, I have the largest allocation on the West Coast of Porsches. And I'm getting 3 GTSs and 6 Speedsters. Get the GTS. He's like, I'll give you my first allocation, customize it however you want, do whatever you want to with it. And so I bought it from him. And I've had the car ever since. I've driven across the country a couple of times. It's got a lot of miles on it. It's been ceramic coated and everything else, but it's got 1 million rock chips on it. I keep it clean, but it's got some stories.
So fair to say you've owned this car longer than any car you've ever owned, maybe? Pretty close?
Close to it.
Pretty darn close, right?
It's close to it.
There's something about that, the GTS. So for me, you know, when I talk about the Porsche GTS cars,
Yeah.
right? It's easy for me to remember because the first one came the year that I was born, 1964.
Yeah.
And it was a car that, for me, is the sexiest Porsche ever built, the 904. And there's just something about that car that's just, you know, it speaks a different language. And the whole GTS part of it. And when you talk to GTS owners, you know, they are, I think, some of the most loyal and passionate Porsche owners out there.
Yeah.
They just love everything about the cars. It's to a person who's a GTS owner. It's really an incredible thing.
Yeah.
You know, more so than anything else. So that's pretty cool.
Well, it's
to hear
funny.
that you bought it new and you still have
Well,
it. today.
Zach, that you're having in a second, we went to Amelia Island to Works Reunion, and we drove this car, and he has his amazing Targa, right?
Yeah.
Wants to say, let's go get a GTS. Nobody wants to sell their GTS. I want to feel like the 997 GTS, this first generation of these cars in the modern era, were more of a detuned GT3 than the current high option 911s.
Sure.
And what I loved about this car was when I personalized it and I ordered it with all the power kits and everything else as anybody with an ego would.
Yeah.
Right? But then I ordered it with as little everything else as possible. So I stripped it. There's no auto dimming mirrors, there's no automatic this or automatic that. So I wanted it to be as light as possible because I had a convertible. We're in Florida, right?
Right.
So I wanted the convertible, I wanted all these things, but I wanted that raw experience. And I wanted that Porsche experience. And I just think that these things have an amazing gearbox, an amazing balance.
Yeah.
It's just one of those cars that I wish we had floor-mounted pedals as well in these cars, but we don't. But it's just, it ticked all the right boxes. And today I go drive the new cars and I say, they're amazing. I'm not going to give this up for that though.
Right.
Yeah.
So, is there a car that is on your mind now that's, you know, maybe near term, next year or 2 years, that you're thinking, you know, that would be a cool car to own? That's something, and I'm talking about a new car now.
Yeah.
Okay. What in the new car world, whether it be Porsche or anything else, I mean,
Yeah.
we're a Porsche show, so let's talk about Porsche.
I know.
What sort of has your attention about Porsche?
Ironically, like nothing gets it.
Really?
Yeah, like if honestly, you're not going to sell me a car today, but I would love
Yeah.
to see something else that really grabs my attention enough to walk away from this. I look at the residual value in a decade,
Yeah.
and it's like, is it really that high?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, wow. You know, if I was to go out and be crazy right now, I'd want Jimmy Glickenhaus's boot, right? I'd want this off-road machine, right? But I really don't have anything else I'd want to drive around. I drive my car to work every morning, 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, roof down in Florida, 83 degrees, music blasting, you know, the exhaust wide open, you know.
So I guess you answered a question
Yeah.
I didn't even ask. You're completely satisfied with this car, and it's
Yeah.
really not a car, whether it be new or old, that you're really thinking about that
No.
would speak to you as well as this car speaks.
No, not at all. Like,
Well, that's great. I
nothing
mean,
else has that, I want to say, the gearbox, the brakes, the whole thing. And I got to tell you, like, I mean, you have a problem. You're selling a car that doesn't break.
Yeah.
And that was the joke. Like, if I go all the way back to 14, 15 years old and sitting on a skid pad somewhere with all these sprinklers on it, sitting there chatting with Mr. Elford and saying, what about this and what about that? And he says, well, we didn't even have a service van because Porsche said they don't break.
Right.
Right?
That's
And so I can say that my average cost of this car is like $500 a year.
I know, isn't that crazy?
Until I have to change tires.
Yeah.
And then I choose the expensive tires.
Yeah, yeah.
But honestly, like if I could, I'd choose slippery tires on the back and sticky tires on the front and go around creating havoc, right? But they just don't have a problem.
Well, that, you know what? Nothing better than that. You've got a car that you love. You know, it's been good to you. You've
Yeah.
been good to it. And so life is good. So maybe talk about a Porsche experience. Maybe we can sort of wrap up with you. You know, what is something that you've done in your life, a Porsche experience, that has meant something special to you, that, you know, has just really done it for you in the Porsche world?
I want to say, so I've had a lot of different Porsches. And I'm not going to sit here and name all of them, right? So personally, I've owned some, the dealership has owned some. I've restored quite a few. I want to say there was a 356 that really kind of wrapped the whole experience up. Like it encapsulates what we have today. I drove this car on rallies and road races and all sorts of other things, and it was a 58 356 Super 90, it was a Super A. So, but we had, upgraded the carburetors and done all sorts of things, and I had an individual in Southern California prepare the car for me, and it almost twice the original horsepower, right, which is pretty easy to get today with modern technology. That car, to me, drum brakes, the gearbox, the 4-speed, the works, I loved driving it. And you never got to dangerous speeds.
No.
Right? But you felt really dangerous driving at 65, 75 miles an hour on modern traffic. Those 356s to me were just, they do translate to today's cars.
Yeah, they do. For sure do.
I had a Speedster, which was, when I sold it, it broke all sorts of records, and I have to compliment RM for the success I had with this individual car. But I had a Speedster. It was a Rudge Wheel Speedster. It was purchased with a hard top at the time of when it was new, and it was a perfect car that was perfectly restored by a Pebble Beach judge, and it was the perfect Speedster. And I said, I'm going to keep this car forever. I'm too tall.
Right.
The windshield comes up to my nose and my eyes gets blasted with bugs.
Yeah.
So I felt like if I had thought about it, I should have gotten a 59 Super, but a Roadster of a later year. But I didn't fit in that car very well, but I felt like that car was so punchy and so quick. Yeah. And you could lock up the brakes and turn it into a corner and flick it around, and the thing just keeps going as a tractor, or as you would imagine a Volkswagen.
Yeah.
And this whole weekend with Monterey and that original Porsche, and they're talking about how that car had, 30, 40 horsepower, right?
Yep.
And I'm thinking back at this car had 60, 80 horsepower, but it was so fun. The numbers don't mean anything anymore.
Yeah. It's funny, you talk about that car from 1948, the Gamon car. A lot of people look at that car in the Porsche world and say, this is the 356, this is the first one. But as I talk to more people, not a lot of people realize that this was not a rear-engine car. This was a mid-engine car.
It was moved up.
Right? So that makes it something that's extra unique in the Porsche world.
Yeah.
For everyone to sort of,
I think
be
that
attracted to and look at it in a little different light.
If it was what they wanted it to be, that Porsche would have bought it.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just like we would all sit around and be skeptical and have our talks. But that car, I think that with who built it, who sat in it, what thoughts were going on. I walked back, and I Saturday afternoon I rewatched Chris Harris's video on that car, and he was 100% right. Who sat in this car and thought about this idea that translates to this?
Yeah, right.
Right. So call it a Porsche, call it a nothing, call it a Nazi car, call it anything you want, right?
Right.
That car created history.
Yeah,
that of three cars created history, and it was the translation of what can we do with simplicity? What can we do with something that's, we won't call it imperfect, but a car that was bulletproof, realistically. These Volkswagens are bulletproof, and they created something with very little. That translated to a whole lot.
Yeah, it's awesome. So since you're on the 356 then, and we'll wrap up with this.
Yeah.
So what do you think of our friend Rod Emery and what he's done with 356 Outlaws? This is, in the 356 world, I see it on both ends of the spectrum. I see people who are just absolutely love what he's done and how he's, what he's done with the car and so forth, and then other people are they're still not sure about it. What are your thoughts?
Oh, we actually had a discussion today a little bit and yesterday about both Richard Sloan and Emery and like Zach's car. I was saying, Richard would love your car, but I'm going to be biased. I've actually owned an Emery Outlaw.
Okay, cool.
And I got to say, between my totally original 356s and the car that I had that he built for somebody else that I purchased, I kept it for a number of years before I sold it to somebody else who was begging me to buy it from me. I love it. Yeah. Like, I got to tell you, like you take this recipe and you improve it in today's technology.
Yeah.
I can tell you in this, if I deviate from our conversation and say I love fake Cobras.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah.
Like there's something to be said. You put 4 wheels in a Coke can, it's a lot
But
of
there's
fun.
something about Rod's story.
Oh,
there's something about Rod's. I mean, he grew up in Porsche. He
Yeah.
grew up around the parts. He, you know, what he did as a young boy was, you know, look at parts and look through parts catalogs, and so he really understood, you know, what worked, what could work, what part could work here, where it also
His
worked there.
opinion really counts.
Yeah, it does.
And so when you look at what he builds off of knowledge. He builds off of experience.
Yeah.
And with any job or any career, the experience really makes a difference. He has the experience. He has the feel.
Yeah.
You know, we get into a car and we put our fingers on the steering wheel and we say, your right rear tire is out of balance. Somebody, how do you know this?
Yeah.
We know it, right?
Yeah,
He knows what these cars need, how they feel good. If you put 400 horsepower in a 356, you're an idiot.
Right.
You put 250 horsepower, you're a daredevil, right? But you have 130 horsepower in a 356, that's a lot of fun, right? Because originally he had 48, right? So he knows how to build these cars, and all the recipe that he has works. And I'm not one to say that he's damaging history or anything else like that. I love the fact, personally, having had these cars, if that car was original at the time and somebody turned it into this, I would say that's sacrilegious. But if you take a car that was in pieces and you find another engine, I mean, we've all seen the photographs of the warehouses in California with 1 million square feet of engines and parts and everything else on wrecked Porsches. They've built a lot of cars, and there's a lot of pieces out there, and a lot of it is rusted. So, you know, he's improved upon the original recipe.
The car culture out there is just, it's awesome.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, you know, for everybody who talks about the California car culture, the Florida car culture is pretty strong too. There's a lot of people in this state who are very passionate about their cars. So I want to say, hey man, it's been awesome meeting you. I'm so glad that Zach, you know, made a recommendation. It was just a quick conversation we had the other day, and he said, hey, I've got a buddy, he loves, I'm like, bring him on, let's talk about it. So it's so cool, and what are the chances of all these things falling into place? So I really want to say thanks for coming on with us tonight.
Thanks.
You know, sort of sharing your story and your perspectives on Porsche. I think people will enjoy hearing that.
Do you mind if I plug my brother for a second?
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
My brother's Michael May. He hosted Autobiography on Velocity and Motor Trend.
Okay.
He's got another show coming out that's about haunted highways.
Oh, cool.
So look forward to that, but he's the host.
Nice.
We develop the concepts. He's in charge of everything.
Very cool.
And you know, we've had fun with this for a long time.
Yeah, it's great.
And
it's good
you
fun.
know, back over 10 years ago, we started recording videos of cars that were going to auction. And now what do you get with every big car?
That's right.
You get a video.
That's right.
Right? So
that's what speaks
I want
to
to give
everybody.
him credit that nobody else gives him for creating the video content for the auction catalogs.
Awesome. Well, that's cool. Well, Brian, so nice to meet
Thanks
you.
a lot.
Thanks for coming on, sharing your car and your
Love it.
stories. And so I think now we're going to trip over to a little piece that I don't know what they put together, but it's something that's entertaining, I'm sure, while we go ahead and change up the set and bring Zach in next.
Put your dress on.
All right, so we're on. All right, guys, so we're doing a little set change. I guess there was we had a little bit of a difference going on there. I guess we didn't have a segment. But now we're going to have a new segment with my daughter, Amanda Sheeny here. She is probably the person who taught me the most about Porsche.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly,
Sure.
right? No. What I can tell you, though, is that you've been awesome sort of supporting my habit and your mom's habit for so many years with Porsche and riding in our cars.
Habit, I think it's addiction.
It's addiction, not a habit.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what do you think about all this stuff when you hear Brian's stories? So what comes to your mind about about his passion for Porsche? Like, what do you think was special about all that?
Well, I think anyone's passion for anything is special. If you can tell a story that connects to someone in some way, it's awesome, and that's gonna grow into whoever you tell it to. They're gonna fall in love with you, and then hopefully fall in love with the brand you're talking about, and it's cool. It's definitely, you can't ignore it.
No, you can't, right? There's something about it. It comes out and it just sort of hits you, and you got to take it in and have fun with it. So, for you, when you talk about Porsche with you, and where it all started, like, what is your first memory of anything Porsche that you did?
Hey, Brian.
We have a lot of Brian's here.
Yeah.
My first memory is in your car, well, Mom's car, I guess you would say. It's not your car technically, but just in the back seat of a 2-door little thing, and changing into my leotard to go to gymnastics practice, doing homework, and then just setting me along on my day. It was a normal thing. It was never questioned. It was our car. That was it.
It was just a 911.
Just a 911.
And you were riding in the back seat of an air-cooled 911
Yeah.
that a lot of people just dream that they could ride in.
I didn't even know.
And
I had
you had no idea. That was just normal circumstance.
Yep.
For about, 10 years?
Oh, yeah. From when we moved here. 2nd grade.
2004.
Yeah.
Do you remember when you graduated from the back seat to the front seat?
Yeah, when Sarah finally wasn't on my practice schedule anymore, I got to go in the front seat.
So your practice schedule for gymnastics?
Yes.
All right. So that was the deal, right?
Yep.
So it was a tandem hauler, so
Yep.
to speak, back then, right?
Yep, from
Okay.
Mom's work to the school to the gym, I-4, everything.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so outside of that, so that was the normal everyday stuff, right? Porsche experience, normal everyday. What about outside of that? Is there anything that sort of stuck in your mind that you did that, just, it's kind of a cool thing that you think about from time to time when you think about Porsche when you were a kid? What do you remember what that was?
I think we went to North Carolina. I definitely remember that whole thing. I don't remember what it was called.
It was called the Porsche Parade.
Yes,
that was in
that's what-
Charlotte, I think back in about 2007 or 2008.
So we were young. I was like 10,
So
11.
what about that whole
I just
deal?
remember being with all these families, couples, little kids too, other our age girls, and just playing around with all these cars around us. Like, you walked around the street and there was hundreds of cars, and it was, again, I thought it was normal, but obviously it was not normal.
It wasn't, yeah.
And driving fast with you in the back seat, and just, we went all those windy roads in North Carolina through the mountains. That was cool. But yeah, no, I think that was probably the number one thing that I remember at the youngest. And then just all the cars and coffees, all the listening to you talk to other people, talk about cars. I had no idea what you were talking about, but you loved it, so we always just tagged along.
Okay, cool. So what about anything from racing? Do you remember anything
Yes.
about that? Anything that stuck out?
Yeah, I remember going to Sebring, and we took a little motorhome, just me and you.
Okay.
We sat on the banks and just watched the cars, and then of course one time, I don't remember what race it was. It might have been Daytona. You got us down onto pit road, and
Okay.
we were not supposed to be there.
That's right.
We had no
tickets.
tickets.
We just sort of walked past and we said we own the place, and we just got in there.
And
I do remember that.
I was nervous.
I remember that, and I remember you
just-
sitting right on pit wall, and
Yep.
the cars came in
Yep.
for the pit stops, and you
We weren't
just...
supposed to be there.
Yeah,
It was that
very
long.
cool. Well, awesome. Well, you know what? Thanks for coming on and just sort of, sharing your experiences, about Porsche. That's fun, right?
Yes, of
Right?
course.
So, hopefully we can do more of this.
Yeah, maybe
Why
I'll
not?
stick around.
You're right. You're here now. Maybe
Yeah.
you'll be the new female voice of Porsche Night.
I don't
the
know.
Female face of Porsche Night.
Might need to learn a thing or two, but yeah, sure. I'm
Okay,
up for
cool.
it.
Well, awesome. Well, thanks for coming on.
Of course.
And we're going to bring in our next guest now, and his name is Zach, and he's going to tell us about all of his Porsche experiences and fun, and he's got a really cool car. And do you believe that? Look
Yeah,
at that
it looks
car.
just like ours.
Looks just like ours. His is a little bit nicer though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
it's a little
it's
bit
okay.
more special. So
Sorry.
cool. Thanks for coming on. And Zach, come on now. And
Thank you, buddy.
yeah,
How are ya?
yeah. So hey,
Good to see you.
thanks for bringing Brian out here. That was a
Oh yeah,
man.
Isn't it great?
Oh, it was perfect.
I mean, I don't buy a car, look at a car without talking
Without
to Brian.
him.
Let me
All
tell
right,
you,
well, cool.
he
Well,
knows
awesome.
more than anybody I know with cars. Absolutely.
Well, that's awesome. Okay, so this car that you had. Let's start with your car, okay?
Sure.
And then we'll get to all the other stuff.
Gotcha.
This car, you know, again, this crazy thing about you and Brian and our car and our family,
Right.
you know, all these same years. It's unbelievable how this has all come together. Maybe tell us about how this car has come to your ownership. Where did it start? Where did this whole thing with this
Well,
89 start?
I tell you, it came from a very special guy named Jim Henson.
Okay.
Jim Henson was the CEO of the Dr. Phillips Foundation. And he ran it all, did it all. He was then chairman of the board of everything related to the Dr. Phillips Foundation. I was blessed to have him as a buddy from the University Club downtown.
Okay.
And so he had two Porsches that I admired for years. One was an 87 white Carrera cab, non-turbo, and then this car.
Okay.
And one day, you know, I would see him driving the white 911 often. Every once in a while, I'd see the red Targa. And I'll be honest with you, at that time, I didn't really realize that the Targa was a car that only 105 had been made in the world, 45 for the U.S. market. I had no idea about that. I just liked the Porsche.
Yeah.
The 930, and there's obviously stories as to why when we were younger, what got you into Porsches and into cars like that. But Jim and I used to see him. I'd go out and work out every afternoon at the University Club for years, still do. Great club, by the way.
Cool.
We just built a new building, you know, right where the old one was, loving it. And, you know, I saw Jim, he was shooting pool as usual. I said, Jimmy, I said, I see you've got the turbo here. I said, man, I haven't seen that car in a long time. He says, well, you better take a good look at it. And I said, why? He says, because I sold my white Carrera last week to a wholesaler. And I said, you sold the white one? And he says, yeah. And he says, and the wholesaler is coming today at 3 o'clock to buy this car. And I said, really? And I said, I remember looking at my watch and saying, okay, well, it's 11:30. And I said, so he's coming at 3. And I said, okay, Jim. And I said, listen, you know I love that car. You've heard me for years. Knew him at Alworth. He was a member there for many, many years. I'd see him around there. And he said to me, he goes, well, what are you thinking? And I said, well, Jimmy, I said, and nobody called him Jimmy. I did, just to call him Jimmy. And I said, Jimmy, I asked him what he was selling the car for at the to the wholesaler. He told me the number, and this is 8 years ago, by the way.
Yeah, sure.
And so he told me, and I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, Jim, if I can go and get a check and bring it to you like in 5 minutes, will you sell me the car for that number? And he says, for you, yes. And I said, okay. I happen to have thankfully, my wife was downtown. Of course, she's the one with the checks. And so I had to go back to the office, and she's usually not at the office at that time, but she was that day. And I said, Andrea, you got to come see this car. And I had clients waiting for me. They were there. And I said, I'm sorry, there's something very important I have to do. And they're watching me in my parking lot at my little office downtown. And I said, you know, my wife comes out, she takes a look, she jumps in, took her for a quick ride. I said, you know, I really want to buy this car. I said, do you have a check with you? She says, sure. And so I told her to write it for me and signed it, ran it over to Jimmy. I said, Jimmy, here you go. And I said, title has passed. You might as well call the wholesaler. And he says, I will. And that's what he did. He called him back.
What a great story.
And that was it. And he loved it because the fact is that he got to see it here.
Yeah.
He got to see it. He passed away, sadly, a few years ago.
Okay.
And we miss him.
Well, he's looking
great
down
guy.
now.
Great guy.
He's looking down on the finished
Yeah.
product. That you've done a little bit of freshening to the car.
I did.
Nothing
I did.
crazy. just a little freshening, I guess.
Actually, you taught me part of that.
Okay,
I said,
all right, cool.
you said, hey, don't take all the patina out, Zach.
Yeah.
Leave some of the patina.
Yeah.
I left it in the seats. I had them just, shall we say, freshened.
Yeah.
Took some of the dings out. There was not many of them, but there was 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And, changed the carpeting. You and I had talked about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I call it a shag carpet that I just didn't care for in it. But what was the term for it?
I think they called it plush.
Plush, okay. And so when I looked at my Porsche documentation that they sent me, the certification, the certificate, nothing about the carpeting. So I tried to stay with that, and I actually tracked the car down. It was sold from a dealership in New York, and I actually called the fella in New York, the biggest. Sadly I don't remember his name, but it was one of the bigger, if not the biggest, Northeast Porsche dealer up there. And I talked to him a few years ago, and I said, "Do you remember selling this Targa?" Of course, at that time, I had figured out, or at least found out, there was a guy that I saw at a million Barrett Jacksons, and a number of Goodings and auctions that I go with Brian actually often, so he can make sure I don't make any mistakes. And so we go up there, and I called this guy, and I said, just before I bought the car from Jim Henson, and I said, "Listen, I'm getting ready to buy this car. Actually, I've done the deal already. What do you think?" And I told him, I said, "It's a 1989 930 turbo Targa." And I remember he says, "You mean a hard top with a sunroof?" And I go, "No." He says, "You mean a cabriolet, like a convertible?" And I said, "No." I said, "I do know the difference between a Targa and what you just said." And so he says, "Are you sure it's a Targa?" I said, "Yeah." So I took a picture. Actually, back then, I guess, did we have those cell phones? And sending, I don't know, but
they weren't quite like that.
I think they were, to the point where we were. But I remember getting him some sort of photo, and he's like, "Oh my gosh," he says, "that's a Target. You realize that's a really rare car." And of course, it was a big mistake calling him, because the guy drove me nuts for the next year and a half. Oh my gosh.
People
I got this guy, I got this guy, I got this guy. And I said, look, it's my friend Jim's car. I promised him that I'm going to keep it and take care of it. And to be honest with you, I just enjoy it very, very much.
So again, it's one of how many again?
It's one of 105
Total
in the
that were
world,
built in the
total.
world, and
45 were built for the U.S. market. And even though it's got, as we know, the dual exhaust on there, normally that's a Euro car.
Right.
But that's the fellow that bought it. He was, and interestingly, I am Greek, as you know, Stumbos.
Yeah.
And the guy that owned it up there in New York and bought it was also Greek.
No kidding.
And he owns some restaurants up there. And he bought it, and he got some of the factory upgrades. The exhaust, and you can, if you see the front the front spoiler on there is really from a slant nose.
Yeah.
But all that, I was thinking about taking it back to the original, and the Porsche seller, the dealer up in New York, said, "Yeah, don't do that."
Yeah,
He said that's how it was bought. And it was the Rough company, Roof Rough, they all call it.
Yep.
I mean, you have to order that through the dealer back then.
Yeah, it was
And
like
so that fella ordered a few accessories, the dual, and some of these things. I mean, I probably wouldn't have done any of that, but it's a significant upgrade on the exhaust, because when I had it picked up and looked at, they were like, "Oh my gosh, you can take this exhaust off and sell it if you want it." I'm like, "No,
it's with the car.
It's with the car.
It's meant to be there."
So, that's how it's been.
That's cool. So how much are you enjoying the car now? How often?
I love it. I mean, I enjoy it.
You drove it in today. You knew you were coming to the show, so you had to take it out.
I did. I shipped it up to my good friend Gary Trout, who's a really passionate car builder outside of Indianapolis. And he's just a top-notch guy. I've been friends with him for a dozen years. And he's helped me with those 2 NASCARs.
Yeah. Yeah.
that back in the day. I'm sure we'll talk about that real
Hey,
briefly.
well, let's switch gears. Let's switch
Sure.
gears off of the Porsche. So you're
Yeah.
a car guy, right?
I am a car guy, but I'm a cheap car guy.
So
I don't go
was
by.
this the first Porsche?
No, third.
Third one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears.
Sure.
So we were talking the other day on the phone, and it just happened to be the same day that Dale Earnhardt Jr. had this terrible accident
Right.
last week with his
Right.
airplane. His family on the airplane.
Right.
They had a crash. Miraculously, they got out before the car burned, or before the plane burned.
Right.
Just amazing thing. We're talking on the phone that day, and I asked you about some photos and whatnot, and you sent me over photos of these cars. So tell us about these cars.
Well, you know, it's interesting because the Hendrick race car that I have, it is a Hendrick race car. It's a, you know, Earnhardt 2012 chassis body, but it is well, let me say it this way. I've got a 2012 Earnhardt car, an authentic car driven by Earnhardt,
Right.
and then a 2010 Jeff Gordon car with the
Okay.
flame paint.
Right. Okay.
I sent you some pictures of.
Yeah. Yeah.
And back in the day, and this might have been in 2015 or 14, Hendrick would sell the chassis every once in a while.
Right.
And my friend Gary Trout knew somebody who I'd gotten to know, and he called me one day and he says, listen, he says, I can get these two chassis with no body, no nothing on it, but it's, you know, authentic, raced by Earnhardt, raced by Gordon. You get the, you know, the NASCAR chip. You can take that chip out. There's 2 or 3 of them, I think, in the car. Put them in your computer, see exactly where that car has raced, where it's been, what it's done, who raced it. The Earnhardt car is a special car because when he first had his concussions that, of course, led to the end of his racing career, the first race back from his concussions when he was out for a little while, he raced in Martinsville. And in Martinsville, he was doing really well, and towards the end of the race, he had a small accident in that car in Martinsville. And that's the chassis that I own.
Wow.
And it wasn't even that much money to buy, to
Right.
be completely
Yeah.
honest with you. And I said, yeah, let me,
But you had to have somebody put a body on it
I
for you?
did. I had to have my buddy Gary Trout from GT Performance Group. He says, listen, we can build it. You get it, we can build it. And I said, okay, well, let's do that. And so we did the body, and we actually, there's two, you know, the Nationwide series, there's an SP2 motor, which is an easy motor. You can buy it crate, really just like a Ford 289 or
Yeah.
whatever you want, and you can take it out of the box and plug it in. And so Gary said, you know, no, we need to build the true NASCAR motors for these cars. I said, really? And he had not built any R07 before, but he's got some friends with Hendrick Motorsports, actually, I won't say any names, that, you know, helped him and helped us get the right parts. And we actually built 2 motors, 2 R07 motors, which are NASCAR ready. You can go racing.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we couldn't port the heads quite perfectly like Hendricks.
Yeah.
Those are secret. They won't give us that information. They wouldn't give us that information either. So we had to do the best we can. And we ported the heads and did the best we could. And, you know, they're authentic racing cars that are really, really special.
So are they for show, just for
Well, you
or
can-
have you had any opportunity to take them out?
I haven't taken them
exercise
out
a little
yet
bit?
because once they sit for a while, you've got to get the valves redone. You know, there's pressure on the valves, so you got to have them rebuilt, which I plan to do.
Yeah.
And at some point get them out on the track a little bit. But you can run into historical races
Yeah.
with them.
Yeah.
That's why people love them. People want them.
Yeah.
I hope they likely will end up in a museum. I think is where they kind of belong.
Well, that's awesome. Well, they're in your
but
museum right now.
Yeah, well,
At
they're
at
in
the
mine.
house.
Yeah, they're-
So you've also had a special Corvette, a 1972 Vet, I think it was?
Yep, I've got an LT1 72 Corvette, yellow. That's a new addition, I have to say. Beautiful car. It's a one of, I believe it's 242 of them. Low number car, and it is a 97.5 NCRS scored car. It's a spectacular car, in and out. Just
Wow.
really a nice car.
Wow. Very cool.
And again, my buddy Brian May, he's always talked about the steel bumpered Corvettes. I think I was a little late to the game on the 67s and the 66s. They did go crazy, and they've come back down a little bit. But these LT1s, which I've always liked the LT1, the hood, and it's 20, 25 horsepower less than the 427, no big deal. But they're very undervalued in my opinion, and Brian's opinion. And I think there's a lot of bang for the buck there, and I love that car. I really
Nice
do.
little addition. All right, so
Yeah.
maybe we get back to Porsche now, right?
Sure.
We had our little departure. We had our car guide
Yes.
thing, but now we got to get back to Porsche. So this wasn't the first one that you had. What are some other things that you had, and maybe talk about what you've done with any of those cars? Maybe a special trip or something that you've done unique with it.
I had a lot of fun with my 03 turbos. I had a wonderful 997 turbo that was just, I don't know why, but I bought it used like almost every car I have. And it was just crazy fast. I don't know if it was chipped or what it was. I had other friends that had other 997 turbos, and it would just run circles around all of them.
Wow.
And the only thing that bothered me with that car is it had a bit of an engine knock in idle. And I remember taking it to Porsche, and they said, look, they all have an engine knock. It's not a big deal. We'll admit yours is on the higher end of normal, but it's normal. And I said, okay, as long as you're telling me it's normal. That car was fun because I used to run that out to Lake County and go, I called it the route around Mount Dora.
Sure, yeah.
And those roads where my poor wife used to go crazy watching us take our R1s and our motorcycles out that way, of course, till I wiped it out in 2000 on Father's Day. That was the end of that. She put her foot down.
So you had three. You had the 03, you had this
I had
Target,
the
and then what was
03.
the other one?
I had an 04 Aero Package 911, which I liked a lot.
I think of the 996s, other than this GT2 that Brian
Yeah, and I
was
called it
talking about,
997. It's
right?
996.
Yeah,
You're right.
Those factory Aero kit Carreras.
It was cool.
Were some of the coolest cars, right?
Yeah.
Because basically this looked pretty close to what a GT3 looked like.
It did. My problem with the car, which I loved, it handled super well. You turn it on rails, it was great. My problem was I bought that after the turbo.
Oh yeah,
So it's really the other way you're supposed to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
You're supposed to get the non-turbo first, and then the turbo.
So is this the first time you've been out to Ace Cafe, or is this?
No, I've been out here.
Been out a few
Absolutely.
other times.
Oh yeah.
You enjoying the place?
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, it's a cool spot,
wonderful.
right? A lot of history here.
Absolutely. The motorcycles here are spectacular. The owner here, I remember meeting him once. I think he's from England.
Mm-hmm.
We walked around, looked at some bikes together. I love bikes. A good buddy of mine named Mike Politis out of Volusia County, another lawyer buddy of mine, he kind of introduced me to Porsches young. He's about 3-4 years older than me. And I remember being, 14 and he was 18, 19, and I think he was already having some nice Porsches. And I fell in love with them.
Really? What was that first one?
It was an Aero. It was an Aero package.
It was an Aero package.
Non-turbo. I remember he did not have stock, exhaust on it. It sounded amazing. I talked to him about that car just the other day, and I think he had a short shifter on it. It was just an awesome car. As a matter of fact, I remember him saying, "Man, I shouldn't have sold that car," and this and that. I shouldn't have sold my 03 turbo. That was a monster.
You just got to let it go. We're all just stewards of these cars. They're just sort of passing through our hands, and sometimes you got to let go. I'm the same way. I've got a 75 914 that was my first Porsche that I bought in 1983, that I still have today.
Yeah,
You know,
wow.
so it is kind of tough
for you.
to let
I've
go
had
of
this
things.
the longest.
Yeah.
And I intend to.
Oh, well, good.
I'm going to keep that
Well,
one.
that's awesome. Well, you know, it's great to have you on and
Absolutely,
talk
Brian.
about
Good to
your
see you again.
cars and your passion for everything cars and especially for Porsche
Yeah.
and sharing such a rare car with us.
Thank you.
just don't see these cars anywhere. And I remember that's how we met. You know, Cars
Yeah.
and Coffee.
Exactly.
And out of all the cars that were at Gary's Cars and Coffee out there in Ocoee, your car just. You know, I walked up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta talk to the guy with this car
Yeah.
because this is I know this is a real gem and a super rare car. So I'm so glad.
Absolutely.
Appreciate your friendship.
Good to see you.
know,
Absolutely, Brian.
Since we
Good to
met
see you
a
again.
little bit
Thank
ago,
you.
and you know, you're always welcome to come
Thank
and
you.
have your Porsche moment at our place. I would encourage you to, if you haven't been already, get up to the Porsche Experience Center in Atlanta. If you haven't been there already, I can guarantee you you'll have an absolute top-notch time visiting that place.
Yeah.
It is just
Great idea.
an absolutely fantastic facility. You'll learn a lot about Porsche. You'll see all the latest and greatest of Porsche. They have Porsche Classic workshops, so they're the only, you know, Porsche factory restoration classic workshop in the U.S. there.
Great.
I mean, there's classic partners around, but that is the place that if you want to have Porsche restore your classic Porsche, they do it for you right there.
Awesome.
An amazing operation. Just to see everything there is well worth the trip. So get yourself
Good
up
deal.
there. All right.
Good deal.
All right. So we're
Absolutely.
going to wrap up tonight
Thank
for
you.
Porsche night this month. Hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Couple of pretty interesting guys sharing their stories with us. So until next time, we'll see you at Porsche night coming up here as we get into the September time frame and we start to cool it down, and we'll probably move the show back outside as things start to calm down, maybe in October or so. So thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next time.
Excellent.
All right, man.
All right, buddy.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah.